Welcome to the Nourish Child Podcast, a show about childhood nutrition, feeding kids, and dealing with the ups and downs of growing a healthy child. Here's your host, registered dietitian and childhood nutrition expert, Jill Castle.
Hey friends, welcome back to the Nourish Child Podcast. I'm Jill here, and today we have Kelly Jones on the show. She is a board-certified specialist in sports dietetics and owns both KJN, or Kelly Jones Nutrition, and Student Athlete Nutrition. She began her career early on as an associate professor of nutrition and exercise physiology, and built her performance nutrition business from there on. Kelly works with everyone from collegiate to pro athletes to active professionals and families that prioritize fitness. She is passionate about empowering others to optimally fuel their busy lives and educates families and other people by merging well-accepted scientific evidence on physical and mental health with individual needs and experiences. She's a mom of 2 young boys, a former Division I athlete who still loves to compete in races and weight train. It's awesome to have Kelly on the show. Today we are going to talk about the trends that are happening in sports nutrition, specifically for those of you who have teenage athletes. It should prove to be a very interesting discussion. Remember, you can listen to this podcast on your favorite podcast app, or you can go over to YouTube and watch us in action. Make sure you follow the channel on YouTube and follow the show wherever you listen to podcasts. Here's Kelly. Hey, Kelly, welcome to the Nourish Child Podcast. It's great to have you on the show.
Hi, Jill. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I have a lot of parents that listen to this show and I, of course, have interacted with parents over the years around the topics of sports nutrition. It's not really my focus right now, but I thought it would be great to have you on the show to talk about trends that you're seeing in this arena. But before we start, why don't you introduce yourself and let people know, who you are and what you do?
Great. Yeah. Kelly Jones, sports dietitian. I am a former Division I athlete, so I had the intense sports going on when I was in high school, obviously in college, and then kind of dove right into higher education and sports nutrition at the same time. I had a real passion for helping athletes at the level that I had been at in the past, because if I had known better, there are definitely things I would have done differently on my own. I know there's things that my parents would have done differently too. So while I have worked and continue to work in professional sports, a few years ago, I launched a business that my dietitians helped me with called Student Athlete Nutrition. And we love to work with teams. I've worked with a variety of teams over the years, high school, club teams, spoken to kids as young as 5 years old in some of these rooms that are already committed to some of these more intense schedules, we'll say, and work with a lot of college teams too. So we really wanted to make information more accessible to a wider range of people, because most teams do not have the budget to bring in a sports dietitian, even for a lot of these lecture series or resources we're providing for teams, and definitely not at the level that you see at a lot of the really more famous, we'll call them colleges, where you're seeing them in the news all the time. There's so many schools that just don't have access to any information or resources, don't know what a fueling station is. So we kind of want to, again, put out free, low-cost information to help people navigate the day-to-day and all the stresses that go along with it.
So great. Such a great resource. What was your college sport, your high school and college sport? Just curious.
I was a swimmer. So we had a very year-round sport. We didn't have a lot of, rest time, a couple weeks here and there, even in college. A lot of people hit that point of burnout. And I know too that you don't hit that as easily if you're fueled well. So again, that really can fill a lot of those, just knowing more can fill so many gaps and help the athlete, the parent, the coaches, everyone feel better throughout the process and actually enjoy it, which is the point of it all.
Yeah. So I know that sport well. My second daughter was a swimmer all through high school and college.
Oh yeah.
And my life was sports nutrition
Mm-hmm.
for children and high school athletes. For a long time, that was such a big focus of mine because I was living it.
Yeah.
And it does make such a huge difference. I would say my daughter probably did get burned out after she did her travel abroad and decided that, her swimming career was over, which was fine. But boy, I loved watching her, and what a demanding sport, and such a important sport for nutrition.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what I love when we get to work with swimmers. I consulted with USA Swimming earlier in my career, so
Mhm.
that helped us connect with a lot more teams. And it's always fun to speak to, the athletes that were,
Yeah.
are in the same shoes that I was in. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And love that you're a swim mom and able to provide that important information to your daughter too.
Yeah. Yeah. We might have crossed over at USA Swimming because I used to write for them way, way back.
Oh, did
when.
you? Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
funny. Anyways, so let's talk about trends that you're seeing, especially if you're going around to these colleges and high school teams and working with teens. I'm sure you are seeing these trends. You're seeing sort of the common questions that are coming out of the athlete themselves, but also probably the parents and the coaches. So if you had to sort of talk about your top 3 trends today in sports nutrition for the young adult or young athlete, what would you say you're seeing?
I actually think it's very similar, parents and athletes, because the things that the parents are talking about, especially parents that are thinking about nutrition, thinking about wellness, and want to do the right thing, they may be talking about it around their athletes more than they should. But then you also have the athletes who are in school and they're hearing about trends from their friends who aren't athletes. So I continue to see, this has been, for over a decade, low carb, I'm still asked about all the time. I thought that this was going to go away because it was popular years ago. Now there's more ketone supplements, and thinking that taking these before a workout are going to be helpful. And is that okay for my child? Less on the, I guess we could say, more dangerous side of things and more disordered side of things. Definitely always am getting questions about protein. How much protein is enough for my child? Are protein powders safe for them to use? At what age, how often, how much? I think that there's a lot of misunderstandings about supplements, and always getting supplement questions. And something that I wish people were asking more questions about and thinking more about would be energy drinks, because I think that a lot of athletes, high school students, college students in general, are starting to use them sooner and sooner just because they seem cool, not realizing the negative effects they could have, and parents not even paying attention to, oh, that is an energy drink, even though it's not those classic original energy drinks that we see on the market and that we're more used to seeing. So sometimes it's like energy drink in disguise. And that's something I wish people were asking more about too.
So let's talk about some of these things. Let's start with
Yes.
the energy drinks in disguise. I think that's an interesting, probably newer, nuanced thing as of late, because a lot of beverages have been hitting the market for kids and teens anyways, from flavored waters to functional ingredients and beverages. All kinds of things are hitting the market. But let's hone in on the energy drinks in disguise. What comes to mind when you think of those?
Yeah. So, I mean, if it's okay to mention specific products, I think one of the bigger widespread products being used and marketed, and it looks fun and flashy, is Prime. You see it in every grocery store, drugstore, sporting goods store. And they do have 2 different products. One is marketed as a sports drink. The problem with that is it doesn't actually have carbs, which the athletes need, and it's very low in sodium, which is also what they need. So it really, to me, doesn't qualify as a sports drink. But parents are thinking, oh, it's just like a better version of Gatorade, because people tend to still equate lower calorie or lower sugar with better, even though for athletes, that's not really the case. The problem too is that Prime also has their energy drinks that look almost identical to the bottles of their self-proclaimed sports drink. So we see that kids as young as my newly 6-year-old in kindergarten has said, oh, my mom, my friends have Prime drinks at that age. So it's starting so early. And then that's an easy transition into the energy drink version. And we do see warning labels on products like this. There's others too. Celsius is very popular. I know with college athletes, there's some, confusion as to whether it's even permitted and permissible, because athletes are drug tested at the college level due to some of the ingredients that are there. And there's, kind of like greens powders for adults. There's all of these different products popping up all the time that it's hard to keep up with. So anytime there's caffeine and then added, you mentioned functional ingredients too. I feel like a lot of those get added in here under the proprietary blend. We don't know how much we're getting of these ingredients. We don't know how it's going to affect a child or adolescent. And especially as kids are on their own a little bit more after school at the high school age, they're just buying these things, not understanding the risk. It just seems cool to them and fun and colors and all the things. So those are things that, I want parents to understand how to have productive conversations with their kids about, a lot of times when kids are involved in sports, they have a lot of goals related to them. They want to feel better at practice so they could perform well once they're competing. So understanding the negative effects of those things for now in the long term, I think is a good motivating factor for some athletes, especially the ones that we tend to work with.
Yeah. I think the energy drinks in disguise, especially those like guarana, which acts as caffeine, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some of those things, parents look at the labels and they don't even understand. So it can get really confusing. But then that's funny that you mentioned your 6-year-old, because I'm hearing a lot of parents whose 8 and 9-year-olds want to take Prime, have it at their birthday party or take it to school because everybody's taking it to school. And it's an interesting conundrum for parents.
Yes.
All right, let's talk about carbohydrate, because that was a big myth. That myth has just never gone away.
It's not going away. Yeah.
and wasn't it like 5 years ago that some elite rowers or cyclists came out with this high fat as fuel versus carbohydrate as fuel? Can you kind of explain to listeners what the role of carbohydrate is and why it is so needed as a primary fuel source?
Absolutely. So carbohydrates are the most efficient and preferred source of energy for exercising muscles and for the brain. I think we forget that brain piece a lot when we talk about sports. And for student athletes in particular, obviously they need the brain power when they are at practice or competing, especially some of these sports that require a little bit more agility and focus. But they also need to power their brain all day long throughout school. So in order to pay attention and focus, that's requiring a lot more carbohydrate than days that they're sitting around at home, or even some of the things that we're doing as adults. And then you add on practice after that, and they may be depleted at the end of the day if they aren't eating adequate amounts, breakfast, lunch, snack, so that they can supply what they need, so that their muscles have what they need to. In terms of the preferred energy source, yes, our muscles and brain can work off of other things, but it's a slower, less efficient process. It's not going to help them reach the intensities that they want for more of these power-based or sprint type movements in sports. So we want to make sure that those carbohydrates are available. I think that people too don't understand, the capacity to store carbohydrates as themselves. There's this idea that you eat carbs, they turn into fat. When in reality, we need carbs to regulate our blood sugar all day long, so our body feels it has energy and trust that we're feeding it. And then also, what is extra, unless you're in a huge calorie surplus every day, what is extra gets stored in the muscles. And that muscle carbohydrate is really what we want to feed off of. And if we're depleted of carbs all the time, then it's like your gas tank's not full in the muscles for that movement. So helping parents and athletes understand this is important. I think that something that people really still get hung up on, obviously, is sugar. So some people might say, oh, of course I know that eating fruits and vegetables and, whole grains is okay for you, but the sugar. And that's also where for student athletes, that's probably the quickest and most efficient way to get energy in for them to keep their blood sugar normal so that they do have energy during their practice, and then they're starving afterwards too. You hear all the time parents saying, oh, my child's a bottomless pit. They eat 3 servings worth of dinner. They just eat all night long. And a lot of it is not eating enough earlier in the day and not fueling during their workouts. So, there's talk about carbs for days, but it's definitely an important nutrient for our athletes not to be restricted.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, what also occurred to me as you were talking is we treat protein the same way, sort of evenly distributed throughout the day. Can you comment a little bit about what's going on with protein today in terms of trends and how our bodies sort of need that consistent supply to function
Mm-hmm.
well.
Absolutely. I'm such a protein pusher, I say. I know that a lot of people are saying, oh, we get enough protein, especially when we're talking about athletes and growing athletes. We really need to prioritize spreading it out throughout the day, like you said. A lot of people will focus on right after their workout, or we always make sure there's a protein at dinner, but breakfast and even snacks at school, which I'm always helping people strategize when can you fit in that snack at school. Breakfast and that snack is such a crucial time to have protein come in to not only continue the recovery process for them, but also help support their normal growth and development. And that's really, again, that missing piece. I think, especially for teenagers, we start to look at them too much like adults. Like, really, it's just the recovery that matters when all that growth and development really is still going on, even if they've reached peak height or whatever it is. And spreading that out is so important. The International Society of Sports Nutrition has a great position paper on protein. And I really take a lot of that information, even though it's research on adults, and apply it to teens in terms of how important it is to spread out our intake into 4 to 5 minimum times throughout the day. And then again, consider their schedule and their higher energy and protein needs.
Yeah. Do you find that some athletes, though, are abusing protein?
So what I find is that,
like the boys?
sometimes some boys will. I think a lot of times too, people think that they're eating a ton of protein, and they end up displacing their carbohydrates, or they're so focused on protein that they're getting too full from it, that they're not eating enough of the carbohydrates when they need them. So it is balancing it out at meals and snacks, like you mentioned. So at breakfast, maybe it is a bagel with eggs and fruit, and you're getting that good balance there, right? And that's a quick thing they could have on the go as a sandwich with the fruit could be a banana on the side. Speaking of swimmers and some other athletes, they might be doing 2-a-days in high school already. And those are times where carbs before that workout, and you absolutely need both the carbs and the protein after, so you can both recover and have your energy. So, limiting your carbohydrate intake means all of that protein that you're spending the time on, proteins are more expensive too, the money on, converts into energy because you're not eating enough. And that can really, limit progress for energy levels and recovery too. Again, it does tend to a little bit more be the boys that are asking their parents for weight gainers and, this supplement, that supplement. And, in those cases, it really comes back to how do we do better with food? How do we use a food first approach, supply what we need? And instead of a weight gainer, maybe we're making a smoothie with, healthy fats like avocado and nuts and nut butter to complement all the protein. Because that's where I see more of the risk, is these weight gainers are so high in fat, saturated fat, and who knows what else is in there sometimes because they're not well regulated, that it's not even the protein. It's a lot of the other stuff that comes along with these products that we get concerned about.
Yeah. Yeah. In terms of other trends that you're seeing, it's 2024. What's different this year than 2 years ago in terms of athletes and what they're concerned about?
Yeah, well, maybe it was starting to become more popular a couple of years ago, and maybe again more male boys were thinking about it than their parents. I will say more parents are becoming more knowledgeable about creatine, and this kind of goes along with the protein discussion. And people are very quick to say, "Oh, I feel like they need a creatine supplement. I've heard all of these wonderful things." And I'll be transparent. I take creatine myself for the potential mental health benefits and other things that are supposed to be potentially positive with aging. We have to be very, very careful that that's in addition to a good foundation. So anytime we're talking about supplements, whether it be creatine or something else, it is, let's make sure that the foundation is there. They're eating enough calories, they're eating enough protein. And then if we really feel like you're nailing it and doing pretty much everything that you can right to support their growth, development, and their sport, and maybe they're looking to compete at, an elite level or college level, then maybe that's something we talk about adding in, as long as it's a safe supplement. But just everyone kind of throwing creatine into the mix, I think can be dangerous, especially when they don't know what to look for in a supplement too. So one thing I think for anyone listening who does have some of these older kids or will in the future is that if they are in high school or are going to be participating in college sports, NSF certified for sport and informed sport certifications are absolute must-haves on any creatine or protein or muscle type of product, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the ones that are most likely to have, be tainted with maybe anabolic steroids, prescription drugs. It's a lot more common than people want to believe it is. And having those certifications, they're third-party tests that ensure that that batch that came out of the, supplement factory was free of all these banned substances that we're looking at from the World Anti-Doping Agency, USOC, and so on and so forth. So I think that's incredibly important that one, food first. If you're going to add it, then we have to be very diligent about making sure that it's a safe supplement.
Yeah. Yeah, that is, that's certainly true. And with more and more products coming out, it's really hard none of that's regulated, really. Not the beverages, not the powders, nothing.
Right.
Way back when I was doing, nutrition, sports nutrition in practice, when I was in practice in Nashville, creatine was a no-no for kids. It was not something that we advised. I recognize that, the guidelines have changed, and the stance on that has changed over the last probably 5 years ago or so, maybe even longer. But it is just to set the record straight. It is considered okay for teen athletes, collegiate athletes. It was always under 18, no, over 18, okay. But now it's considered fine. I understand.
Yeah, it is considered safe. There's actually some studies showing that in adolescent females in particular, it may be beneficial to mental health. I think we need more research on boys and, looking past just females with depression and anxiety, which is what they've looked at. But I think that that's, very telling that it could have positive mental health effects. And that's because we're seeing it doesn't just help with muscle power, but also may have antioxidant effects in the brain. So this is why we're seeing a lot more research on creatine across the lifespan. When I was in college, we were like, creatine's a steroid. You shouldn't have it. It's going to hurt your kidneys and give you muscle cramps.
Exactly.
And really a lot of myths or bad studies in the beginning too. And there's some great papers disputing or, dispelling all of those myths. And again, we're learning a lot more day to day. But again, I think it's always it's something that people look at kind of like, it's putting a Band-Aid on sometimes of saying, okay, we're just going to do this and pretend that that's going to make our performance better, help you recover better, injuries, all that stuff. When in reality, it's something that we want to think about food first. I will say too, if you have a child in a sport where they're at risk of concussion, then that is something to consider too. We do have a lot of research coming up on creatine for traumatic brain injury, especially in football players. And that's something that you might want to ask your doctor about if your child ever does have a concussion, to supplement with that and omega-3s afterwards. So that is where it can come in from a more clinical standpoint too.
Yeah. And I just want to follow up or dive a little bit deeper on the mental health aspects of it. Do you know what the sort of function of that? I mean, what is creatine doing for mental health or anxiety and depression? Is it on the, neuronal level, or is it, what's happening? Do you know?
So in adults, we are starting to see more research on creatine for brain health in particular. So I think that really the mechanism is acting as an antioxidant and reducing inflammation. So, again, we just have a couple of studies in these youth females, but we're seeing lower reported scores of depression and anxiety specifically. So that's our early information. And then in adults, we're seeing it, for the aging population too, for cognition, prevention of Alzheimer's disease, you're seeing a lot now as well. So it is that inflammatory response, I think, that it's really potentially helping with.
And what is the dosing like for that? Is that something that you're doing like 1 or 2 milligrams a day? Or are you doing a huge scoop in your water?
Yeah, so
what does that all look like?
The general guidelines are 3 to 5 grams a day. If you're in high school, I'd say probably start at the 3. If you're a bigger male athlete, then maybe you're at 5 grams. And I would start looking at this maybe if, again, you have a lot of potential for college and scholarships and even going past that level and maybe junior seniors. But if you do have someone who struggles with mental health a lot, I don't think it's, a bad thing to consider. Right. But again, antioxidants are also coming from fruits and vegetables and so many other components of our diet that start there first. And if this can also add on to that, then that's great. But the effort that we put in, I think, should start with foods and then go
Sure.
from there. If someone has a traumatic brain injury and you were just introducing creatine at that point, that is where we recommend those loading phases you may hear about, 20 to 25 grams a day for about a week, and then dropping down to 5 grams for the remainder of about a month.
Okay.
And similar effect there is the, anti-inflammatory, antioxidant effects.
Really interesting. Yeah, that's great. Just while we're on protein, eggs.
Yeah.
There's a recent study that came out. I think I saw our friend and colleague, DJ Blattner, post about maybe it was 14 eggs a week. I can't remember. That was considered safe. I don't know if you saw that. But I do know that I was always asked. In fact, my daughter was a swimmer. My younger son was a rower. And he used to literally eat 4 eggs for breakfast. And I got to a point where it's like, I need to research this because this is excessive. And even back then it was like, I couldn't find anything that said it was bad. It wasn't harmful. You know, the whole cholesterol is going to cause cardiac arrest is kind of debunked at this point.
Right.
So what's your take on that? What do you know and see?
I'm a fan of eggs. I know that the American Egg Board puts out information too, saying up to 3 a day is fine when we're looking at adults. I would say for these growing athletes that have much higher energy demands than the average person, that having 3, maybe 4 would be fine. Typically I'm seeing people have 1 egg in the morning and I'm trying to encourage them to have more protein. So I'm saying, can we add a second and encouraging to add on to what they're doing? If we're looking at 6 eggs a day, I'd say, okay, we need to figure out other ways to get this nutrient in. But I think eggs are definitely safe. And again, we can't always take information. And I see this a lot too with sodium, that we think that we shouldn't be having sodium because we're talking about sodium being bad for people with heart disease, right? And you hear these messages about, look for this low sodium food, this low fat food, low carb, whatever. And we forget that the average adult American is pretty sedentary. They're not burning all of these calories. And that even affects our vitamin and mineral needs too. So if you have this teen who probably definitely has greater calorie needs, they also have greater protein, can stand to have more sugar, and also have more, vitamins and minerals they need to get. And I think that egg yolks are actually a great way to pack in a lot of micronutrients and brain nutrients too.
For sure. Yeah, I agree. All right. What else would you like to, what else should we, digest here in terms of trends in sports nutrition today?
Greens powders, I know, are something that I think more people in their 20s, 30s are getting ads about and things like that online. But we did have a few parents work with families sometimes, not just the athlete. Sometimes we're just working with the parent so that they can better understand nutrition, what to provide their kids. Sure. But a lot of people seeing, these gummy vitamins, like, oh, my kids love gummies. Like, let me just grab another bottle of something and add that into the routine. And there's actually a few greens gummies out there. And they're like, okay, we'll just throw this into the mix, take this supplement every day. And again, greens powders, not well regulated. There could be heavy metals in there. We're seeing all these brands pop up all the time. And even if you had one that we know is free of banned substances and all of that, we're still looking at something that is different from fruits and vegetables, right? If you then take the amounts that they're putting into these gummies, it is negligible amount of, nutrients compared to what you would ever get from a fruit or vegetable. So, I would say again, on the supplement side of things and a lot of these trends, always think twice, always look into, the back end of the company, research a company as much as you can, not just on their website, because of course they're going to sing all these praises about themselves and have plenty of wonderful claims that aren't regulated. And a lot of times it's just, a waste of money too. Even if it's not harmful, do you need that? And again, can we put this effort and these dollars towards something that's going to be more beneficial in the long run?
Yeah. I am overwhelmed sometimes when I just see all the products that are out there. I mean, it's overwhelming for me as a dietitian to keep up with all of that. And I know it's so overwhelming for parents too, to really navigate. Even you mentioned multivitamins, that is a category in the kids realm that is so confusing. And there's such an abundance of brands that you see on the shelf, brands that only sell online. I mean, it's just a world of complicated. I don't know how parents are navigating that. And I will just put a plug in for dietitians who do make it their business to keep track of that stuff. To check in with a nutrition professional who's, not necessarily in it to sell these products to you, but really is in it to make sure you and your family are safe and getting what you need. Let's talk about relative energy deficiency in sport, or RED-S, because that, I think my parents who are listening may not be familiar with that terminology and what it's all about. So I would love for you to explain that to them.
Absolutely. And incredibly important time to be aware if you have girls in middle school and high school, because they're the ones that we can identify this the earliest in. But REDS, or as you said, relative energy deficiency in sport, is when our athletes, or even just exercising adults, you can think about yourself here too, end up with what we call low energy availability. Low energy availability is essentially when you are not consuming enough calories to support both your activity level and your body's basic functions. So we know that even athletes, probably at least half of the calories they're burning in a day, sometimes a lot more, are going towards just basic functions: breathing, cardiovascular function, body temperature regulation, and again, growth and development at their age. So when you add on all of the calories that they're burning for their sport and maybe other social things that they're doing too, it really adds up. And it is easy to end up with gaps in their diet where they're not consuming enough calories to support what they're doing. We do know that disordered eating and eating disorders are, things that we really want to look out for in the junior high and high school age range, but they may be more prevalent in athletes too, we know. And then on top of that, it's not just people who are intentionally eating less. It's, again, missing these eating opportunities because we just don't know any better. Usually it's inadvertent, where someone has, skipped breakfast because they're always running out the door, or they're only having a granola bar, and then they're not snacking all day long. They have lunch at 1:00, and then they go into practice with just a prime drink. And then, they're ravenous and eating a ton at night, but it's still not enough to catch up with everything that they missed all day long. Yeah. So, what we end up seeing, a very early warning sign or red flag for this in girls, is loss of menstrual function, or if they never get their period in the first place. We call this amenorrhea. And it's absolutely something that you want to be aware of as a problem and a sign they might not be getting enough calories. The problem that comes along with this, again, this is something we can only see in females. In males, we might see them getting sick more often, or they're not gaining weight quickly enough, or stress and anxiety can come about too, injuries, all of those things. But if you are in low energy availability, your bone health is being compromised too. So what ends up happening here is you don't have enough calories to adequately produce the hormones that are sustaining normal functions in your body, like reproduction and bone development. So if you have a 13-year-old girl that hasn't had their period in 6 months, and they're in a sport, and there might be a nutrient gap, even if they don't present as looking underweight, that is an indicator that their bone health is being compromised, and you absolutely want to intervene and figure out how we can get more calories in them throughout the day. One unfortunate thing is that I still see most pediatricians a little behind the times and prescribing things like birth control anytime someone doesn't have their period. And what that does is just put a big Band-Aid on it, not even a Band-Aid. It just makes it seem like everything's fine. And now you can't identify if we are progressing. We really want to see that period come back so that we know that it's regular, their hormones are, functioning well, and the energy is there to excel in life and their sport and so on. So incredibly important things to be aware of. And again, for, those who aren't menstruating, we want to think about frequent illness, are they easily injured? stress fractures are not present in all sports. Like as a swimmer, that's very rare, but you still are going to have people with REDS, for example. But if you're in track or soccer or cross country or basketball, those are things where it's going to be more likely that you might end up with a stress fracture. And that's also a red flag indicator that you may have low energy availability too. So those are kind of the big things to look out for.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a feeling that it's more prevalent than people realize. And I totally agree with you. I see adolescent females being placed on birth control all the time still. And you cannot tell, even if they've gained weight, you can't tell, when it can take a while to get the period to come back and to come back consistently.
Right.
Because it can show up 1 month and then not show up again for 3 or 4 months. That's not recovery.
Right. That's the key too. We want to see like a consistent 6 months or so to know that you're truly recovered and you're eating consistently. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. What about, I guess we could wrap up with this very last question, and that's around plant-based diets. Do you see that as a trend in adolescence per se or not?
I think it depends. I think that sometimes there are families that are eating more plant-based and they might not be going entirely plant-based and vegan, but eating a lot more plant-forward meals. And because this is trendy, and I will say I'm a very plant-forward person, I think it is great for the environment and can be beneficial for health. But if you're just doing this blindly because you saw that it's good for you and picking all these plant-based products, that is where we need to be considerate of certain nutrients, not just protein, also iron, incredibly important at this age. Also something that all these multivitamins on the market and for kids, and so many don't have iron in them. That should be there if you're getting a multivitamin, but iron, B12, vitamin D, omega-3, these are all the key nutrients that I want people to be aware of that they need if they are eating a lot more plant-based or even plant-forward. I do think that even looking at the Gen Z population, so it's going to be more for younger kids too, seeing and learning about this connection between food and the environment may lead more people to be plant curious and at least try to reduce their meat consumption. So that is something I think that we are seeing more in teens for that reason. I'll say, I know a lot of kids too, who even if their parents are eating meat, they don't want to because of, what they might be learning about in school or what they might be seeing on social media on their own at that age. And it can, again, be very nutrient dense, and you absolutely can follow a vegan diet that supports your athletic goals. But we have to be very careful about those key nutrients that I mentioned. And, something like iron, yes, you can get enough in a plant-based diet. There's strategies like pairing iron foods with vitamin C to enhance absorption, using cast iron cookware, things of that nature. But nutrients like B12 and omega-3, you're not going to get adequately. Yes, there's omega-3 ALA in that form in walnuts and chia seeds and flax seeds. And I think that confuses people too. It's not the same as getting it for marine life. So if you do have a child that is vegan or not eating fatty fish at all, an omega-3 supplement, algae oil is kind of the way to go for that too. So always things to talk about with healthcare providers and consider nutrient gaps with those nutrients in particular.
Yeah. Great information, Kelly. And I think what is so apparent to me and hopefully listeners out there is that, consulting with a registered dietitian, if you have a child or an adolescent or a young adult in college, if you have the ability and and can access a nutrition professional, can be a game changer, not to play on the words, but it really can be a game changer to performance, but also growth and development and just feeling good in the body that you're in. Because if you're playing a sport and you're serious about it and you're not on top of your nutrition, you're not going to feel as good as you potentially can feel, nor probably reach your full potential. And I think that's just that just comes through in this interview, that there's just so many things, so many topics that relate to sports nutrition and so many things to consider if you are in pursuit of, serious athleticism.
Absolutely. And, if it's not accessible to meet with someone one-on-one, making sure that the people you're following on social media, the blogs you're subscribed to, newsletters you're subscribed to, are pediatric or sports dietitians versus these, wellness gurus that we're seeing a lot, or even personal trainers. There's very well-intentioned people out there that just don't have that knowledge to deliver to you.
Exactly. With that, where can people find you if they want to connect with you or follow you on social media?
Yeah, so I'm on social media at Kelly Jones RD. We do have an account for student athletes too, studentathlete.nutrition. And then kellyjonesnutrition.com and studentathletenutrition.com is where you're going to see a lot more of the specific student athlete focused stuff. On my website, we're going to be transitioning this year and really focus on fueling active families in general. So we're going to start to provide more resources for that because it is a whole family affair.
Yes. I agree. Wonderful to have you on the show. Thanks so much for coming on and sharing your knowledge. And I know this is going to be well received, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Hey, folks, thanks for listening to the Nourish Child podcast. Many thanks also to Kelly Jones, my guest today, for sharing her time and insight for you, my listeners. I hope you learned a lot from listening to Kelly today. She was on point with so many of the trends that are happening and the watch outs that you need to pay attention to as a parent of an athlete. If you enjoyed this episode and want to support this show and my work, please take a minute to follow the podcast, leave a rating and review, and visit thenourishchild.com to sign up for my weekly newsletter, The Munch. You can also follow me on Instagram at i.am.pdrd, and don't forget to take the Healthy Habits quiz on thenourishchild.com and pre-order my soon-to-release book, Kids Thrive at Every Size. That's it for this week. Be sure to give that child in your life a loving squeeze today. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Nourish Child podcast, where the #1 goal is to help you grow a nourished child inside and out.